Stepmom and brother stole all my money, until years later I shocked them and made them regret it. They thought I'd never find out the real reason my college dreams were shattered. The real reason I spent years clawing my way up from a pit of despair they dug for me. After 15 long years of being told, in ways both subtle and brutally direct, that I wasn't good enough, that my aspirations were trivial, that my role was to be the forgotten stepchild, while the golden boy basked in their unearned sunshine, I finally learned the full, unvarnished truth about their calculated cruelty. My name is Amanda Parker. I'm now 33, and I'm an account manager at a thriving marketing firm. I'm proud to say I graduated from university debt-free by working 3 jobs simultaneously. I've built a career I love, overseeing a talented team, and most importantly, I've created a stable, loving family with my incredible husband Mark and our beautiful daughter Lily. I achieved financial independence and a life filled with joy, all without a single shred of support from the very people who should have championed me. What I didn't know, as I painstakingly built my life brick by brick, was that their carefully constructed facade of superiority and judgment was crumbling. The truth I discovered wasn't just about their past betrayal, it was about their present desperation. And the most shocking part, their downfall would be served to me not through an act of vengeance on my part, but delivered directly to my doorstep, wrapped in their own ruin. If you've ever felt systematically undermined, betrayed by family, or had your dreams intentionally sabotaged by those who should have been your biggest cheerleaders, then comment below and hit that subscribe button, because you're not alone. Trust me, if you've ever yearned for a story where the scales finally balance, where quiet resilience triumphs over loud cruelty, this story will show you that karma doesn't always send a courtesy text before it arrives. Sometimes it just knocks on the front door. My childhood for the first 10 years was idyllic. My father was my everything. A kind, hard-working man who filled our small home with laughter and books. He was an engineer, practical, but with a dreamer's heart, and he always told me, "Amanda, your education is a treasure no one can ever take from you. You can be anything you want to be." He started a college fund for me the day I was born, diligently adding to it, envisioning a future where I could pursue my studies without the burden of financial worry. He'd point to the stars and tell me to reach for them. Then, when I was 10, a sudden illness snatched him away and the light in my world dimmed considerably. A year later, Sandra entered our lives. My father, in his grief and loneliness, had met her, and she quickly became his wife. Sandra Miller was a woman who valued appearances above all else. Social standing, the right connections, the perfect family portrait. A quiet, grieving child didn't quite fit her image. Her own son, Ethan Bishop, 2 years my senior, was the apple of her eye. He was charismatic on the surface, entitled Underneath, and quickly became the golden child in our new blended family dynamic. After my father passed Sandra, as my stepmother gained legal control over his estate, including my college fund. It was a detail I was too young to understand at the time, a ticking time bomb I wouldn't comprehend until it detonated on one of the most important days of my young life. The pattern of injustice, the slow erosion of my worth in their eyes began subtly. Ethan's achievements, no matter how small, were magnified and celebrated with fanfare. My good grades were met with a cursory, "Oh, that's nice, dear," before the conversation inevitably shifted back to Ethan's latest football game or his brilliant and usually half-baked ideas. Early warning signs were there. Sandra's increasing control over household finances, her casual dismissal of my father's old friends, the way she'd redecorate, erasing his memory piece by piece. I tried to be the good daughter, hoping to earn her affection or at least her neutrality. I realize now I was just a ghost in her meticulously curated new life. The first major blow, the one that truly set the stage for years of struggle, came on my high school graduation day. I was 18, clutching my diploma, a mix of pride and nervous excitement bubbling in my chest. My father's words about education echoed in my mind. I had been accepted into my dream university to study marketing. As soon as we got home, before I could even change out of my cap and gown, Sandra called me into the living room. Ethan was there, lounging on the sofa, a smirk playing on his lips. "Amanda," Sandra began, her tone clipped and devoid of warmth, "Ethan and I have been discussing your future." My heart fluttered with a brief, naive hope that they were about to offer congratulations, perhaps discuss logistics for university. "We've decided," she continued, looking at a spot just over my shoulder, "that the college fund your father left will be given to Ethan. He has some promising business plans, and this capital will give him the start he needs." The air left my lungs. "What? But Dad saved that for my college, for my education." Sandra waved a dismissive hand. "Honestly, Amanda, after seeing your final grades..." I'd gotten A's and B's, but she always found a way to imply they weren't good enough. "We think perhaps traditional university might not be the best fit for you right now. There are other paths." Ethan chimed in, not even bothering to look at me. "Yes, sis, don't be dramatic. You can just take out loans if you really want to go. It's character building." Tears pricked my eyes. Loans. But the fund was there. Dad wanted... "Your father would want what's best for the family," Sandra interrupted, her voice hardening. "And right now, investing in Ethan's future is the best use of those resources. He's going to make us all proud." I looked at Ethan pleadingly. He just shrugged, that infuriating smirk still in place. Survival of the fittest, little sis. That day, something inside me fractured. The betrayal was so profound, so blatant. My own stepmother and stepbrother stealing my father's legacy, my future right out from under me. The next day, I gathered every ounce of courage I had and tried to talk to Sandra again, hoping for a sliver of reconsideration. "Sandra, please," I begged. "Even a portion of it would help. I can work, but I need a start." She barely looked up from her magazine. "Amanda, you're an adult now. It's time to grow up and stand on your own 2 feet. The money is being used for the family, and that's final. Ethan needs our support." The injustice was a physical ache in my chest. There were no witnesses to this specific conversation, just her cold dismissal. The guests from the graduation party were gone. The momentary spotlight on me had faded, and I was once again relegated to the shadows. My dreams of attending my first-choice university seemed to evaporate. I was devastated, but a tiny spark of defiance flickered within me. I wouldn't let them break me. I enrolled in community college, determined to get my associate's degree and then transfer to a state university. I started working part-time at a local coffee shop, the scent of espresso and burnt sugar clinging to me like a second skin. The subtle mockery continued, a constant drip, drip, drip of emotional poison. A few weeks after the fund was stolen, I was desperately applying for scholarships. One evening, a particularly harsh rejection letter arrived for a scholarship I'd pinned my hopes on. I was trying to hide my disappointment at the dinner table, one of the rare occasions I ate with them. The atmosphere usually too thick with unspoken resentments. Sandra, with uncanny timing, chose that moment to say, "You know, Susan's daughter just received a full academic scholarship to that prestigious private college. Isn't that wonderful?" She paused, then looked pointedly in my direction, her voice syrupy sweet. "You see, Amanda, when people truly have talent, opportunities just naturally find them. They don't need to rely on handouts or burden their families." Ethan snickered into his plate. The implication was clear: I lacked talent, and my desire for education was a burden. The words twisted in my gut, adding another layer of despair to my already heavy heart. Mark Peterson, my then-boyfriend, now my husband, was my rock during this time. He was a quiet, steadfast presence, outraged on my behalf, offering not pity, but unwavering belief in my abilities. He knew about the fund, about their cruelty, and his quiet anger mirrored my own. He'd listen for hours, help me with my assignments after his own long days, and remind me of my father's faith in me. The pattern of belittlement was relentless. For my 20th birthday, while I was juggling 2 part-time jobs and a full course load struggling to make ends meet, a small flat envelope arrived from Sandra and Ethan. Inside was a $10 gift card to a generic coffee chain, the kind of place I couldn't even afford to frequent regularly. The card attached in Sandra's immaculate script read, "Happy birthday, Amanda. Hope you can find a little joy in your busy life. Don't overwork yourself, dear. Remember, not everyone has Ethan's natural stamina for success." The faux concern was almost more insulting than outright malice. $10 and a backhanded compliment. I remember staring at it not with gratitude, but with a cold, simmering rage. It wasn't a gift. It was another reminder of my perceived station in their eyes, struggling lesser and certainly not worthy of anything more. I coped by throwing myself into my studies and work. Every latte I steamed, every late night I spent hunched over textbooks in the dim light of my tiny rented room, every small academic victory was a silent act of defiance. I was determined to prove them, and perhaps a small wounded part of myself wrong. I would build my own future, one they couldn't touch, one they couldn't diminish. The path ahead was daunting, filled with financial anxieties and the constant thrum of their disdain. But the first signs of fighting back weren't loud confrontations. They were the quiet click of my keyboard in the library, the weary satisfaction of earning my own money, the unwavering resolve to not just survive, but to one day truly thrive. Little did I know how much harder it would get before the tide began to turn. The years that followed were a blur of relentless hard work sacrifices and a gnawing sense of injustice that fueled me as much as it exhausted me. I successfully transferred from community college to a 4-year state university, but the financial strain was immense. I was determined to graduate without crippling debt, which meant a patchwork existence of classes, multiple part-time jobs, and a social life that was virtually non-existent. Sandra and Ethan remained distant figures, their rare interactions serving only to reinforce their disdain and my resolves. My absolute lowest point, the moment I felt truly trapped and defeated, came during my junior year. It was a frigid November night, a week before final exams. I was in the university library, surrounded by stacks of books, my vision blurry from exhaustion. I'd been working double shifts at a diner to cover a textbook I desperately needed, then rushing to my night shift at a campus call center, and finally to the library to cram. My ancient secondhand laptop, my lifeline for assignments and research, suddenly sputtered, whined, and died. The screen went black, taking with it my nearly completed term paper and all my notes. Panic, cold and sharp, clawed at my throat. I didn't have money for repairs, let alone a new one. Tears welled up, hot and furious. I, Amanda Parker, who prided myself on my resilience, broke down, sobbing, hunched over the dead machine in the silent, cavernous library at midnight. All the unfairness, the exhaustion, the constant struggle crashed down on me. It felt like the universe was conspiring with Sandra and Ethan to prove them right, that I wasn't cut out for this. I called Mark, my voice choked with despair. "I can't do this," I whispered, the fight draining out of me. They were right. I'm going to fail. Mark Ever, my anchor, listened patiently, his voice a soothing balm over the phone. "No, Amanda, they are not right. You are the strongest person I know. This is a setback, a horrible one, but it's not the end. We'll figure it out. I'll come over." He drove to campus in the middle of the night, found me red-eyed and shivering, and simply held me. He helped me talk to a sympathetic librarian the next morning who allowed me extended time on a library computer, and he lent me money from his own meager student savings to get my laptop assessed. It was, alas, beyond repair. The incident left me shaken, but also strangely hardened. The thought of Sandra and Ethan smugly saying, "I told you so," became a new, defiant source of fuel. That same semester, not long after the laptop disaster, came Thanksgiving. I was obligated to attend the family dinner, a ritual I dreaded. It was always a performance for Sandra, a chance to showcase Ethan's supposed brilliance to her circle of friends, and his latest business contacts, usually equally shifty individuals. I was exhausted, still reeling from my academic pressures, and acutely aware of my worn-out clothes amidst their finery. During a lull in the conversation, Ethan, holding court with a glass of expensive wine, no doubt funded by my stolen inheritance, turned his attention to me, his voice booming across the table. So Amanda's still slinging hash and making lattes, living that glamorous student life scraping by on instant noodles are we, his cronies chuckled. Heat flooded my face. Before I could muster a response, Sandra chimed in, her voice dripping with false sympathy, yet loud enough for everyone to hear. Now Ethan, be nice. Amanda is doing the best she can with her situation. Not everyone is cut out for success right away. Some people just take a little longer to find their footing if they find it at all. The public humiliation was like a physical blow. Their words designed to diminish me, to paint me as a struggling charity case in front of an audience, were excruciating. I felt trapped, pinned by their casual cruelty. I mumbled something about needing to get back to study and excused myself, the taste of ashes in my mouth. Mark, who had accompanied me, shot them a look of pure contempt before following me out, his hand a comforting pressure on my back. That night, I didn't just feel defeated. I felt a cold, hard anger solidifying in my core. Despite the crushing weight of their disdain and my ongoing struggles, I wasn't entirely alone. Mark was my constant. His belief in me was a shield against their barbs. He wasn't just emotionally supportive, he was practically helpful. He'd proofread my papers, quiz me before exams, and when I had to take on a third weekend job cleaning offices, he'd often show up near the end of my shift with a coffee just to walk me home, talking about our future, a future far away from the toxicity of my stepfamily. It was these small acts, this unwavering partnership that kept me going. He was the first tangible evidence that I could build a life based on mutual respect and love, not manipulation and belittlement. Just as things were starting to feel a tiny bit more manageable, I'd found a slightly better paying part-time job as a research assistant for a professor, and Mark and I were tentatively discussing our future together, perhaps even getting engaged once I graduated. Sandra delivered another perfectly timed dose of casual cruelty. It was a Saturday afternoon. I was studying and my phone rang. It was Sandra's number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but a strange instinct made me answer. "Hello?" I said. Silence, then muffled sounds like a phone in a pocket or a purse. I was about to hang up, assuming it was an accidental dial, when I heard Sandra's voice, clear as day, not speaking to me but to someone else. She was at a restaurant, the clatter of cutlery and laughter in the background. "And Ethan's new venture," she was saying, her voice brimming with pride, "is just taking off. He's projected to make 6 figures by next year. Such a brilliant mind for business, that boy. He truly has the Midas touch." There was a pause, then a friend's indistinct murmur. Sandra laughed, a tinkling, dismissive sound. "Oh, Amanda. Yes, she finally got that boy Mark to propose. Can you believe it? Surprising, really, given her situation." Her tone on situation was laden with pity and condescension. "Don't expect a big wedding, of course. They can barely afford a fancy dinner, I imagine. Poor Mark, bless his heart, for taking her on." The call abruptly cut off. I sat there, phone still pressed to my ear, feeling a fresh wave of humiliation and a cold, seething anger wash over me. Mark hadn't even officially proposed yet, though we'd talked about it. Her words were a blatant dismissal of my happiness, a casual swipe at my worthiness of love and a future. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about her deep-seated need to see me as lesser to ensure I knew my place in her carefully constructed hierarchy. I told Mark about the call later that evening, my voice trembling with indignation. He was furious. "She's a miserable woman, Amanda," he said, holding me tight. "Don't let her poison get to you. Our life, our happiness will be our answer to her." His words and the genuine love in his eyes raised the stakes for me. I wasn't just fighting for my own survival anymore. I was fighting for the beautiful future Mark and I were determined to build together, a future she would have no part in tarnishing. The years ground on. I was in my final year of university, exhausted but driven. One afternoon, while doing a quick grocery run, surviving on a diet of canned soup and pasta, I had an encounter that starkly illustrated Ethan's enduring arrogance and complete lack of empathy. I was in the checkout line counting out change for my meager purchases when I heard a familiar, disdainful laugh. I looked up. There was Ethan, 2 aisles over his cart laden with expensive steaks, imported cheeses, and bottles of craft beer. He caught my eye and a smirk spread across his face. He sauntered over deliberately, looking down at my basket of budget essentials. "Well, well, if it isn't little sis," he drawled, loud enough for others to hear. "Still doing that whole struggling student thing, huh? Seriously, Amanda, you could have had it so much easier if you just played your cards right, listened to Mom." He gestured vaguely, as if my choices were a personal affront to his easy life. Some people just like to make things hard for themselves, I guess. I just stared at him, my face impassive, though my stomach churned. "I'm doing just fine, Ethan," I said quietly, meeting his gaze. "I'm earning my own way. It's called integrity. You should try it sometime." He scoffed. "Integrity doesn't pay the bills, sweetheart." He then paid for his lavish groceries with a flashy credit card and walked out, leaving me fuming. His taunts, his casual cruelty, it was all part of their narrative. I was the struggling one, he was the successful one. But for the first time, his words didn't make me feel small. They made me feel angry and more determined than ever. A few months after I graduated, magna cum laude, a fact I savored privately, I landed my first real job, an entry-level position at a small marketing agency. It wasn't glamorous and the pay was modest, but it was a start, a foot on the ladder I was building myself. I ran into Ethan at a local community fair. His brilliant business ventures I'd heard through the grapevine weren't doing so brilliantly. There were whispers of debts and failed projects. Yet his arrogance remained stubbornly intact. He approached me, a condescending smile on his face. "Amanda, heard you finally got a little job. That's good for you." He paused, puffing out his chest. "Just some friendly advice from someone who knows the business world. Don't get too excited. Your industry is cutthroat. You should know your place. Don't try to aim too high and risk a big fall. Better to play it safe." His advice was so transparently an attempt to diminish my achievement, to sow seeds of doubt. Perhaps he sensed my quiet determination, my slow but steady progress, and it unnerved him. This time, I didn't even bother to hide my amusement. "Thanks, Ethan," I said, a small, knowing smile on my face. "I'll be sure to keep that in mind." Internally, I dismissed him completely. His words had no power over me anymore. My university graduation, achieved solely through my own grit against all odds they had stacked against me, was my true turning point. Walking across that stage to receive my diploma with Mark cheering wildly from the audience was a victory sweeter than any I could have imagined. I had done it. I had proven them wrong, but more importantly, I had proven myself right. At that moment, I made a silent vow I would continue to build my life, my success, my happiness, and they would have no claim on any of it. My fight wasn't about seeking their approval anymore. It was about living a life so full and joyful that their past actions became insignificant footnotes in my story. I was free of their emotional hold, even if I didn't fully realize the extent of that freedom until years later when they came knocking on my door. The breaking point wasn't a moment of explosive anger, but a quiet, resolute decision to thrive, not in spite of them, but for myself. Years melted into a decade. Life, as it often does, moved on, carrying me further and further away from the shadows of my past. I climbed the ladder at work, eventually becoming an account manager at a prestigious marketing firm. Mark and I got married in a beautiful, heartfelt ceremony. Nothing extravagant, but perfect for us, surrounded by friends who genuinely celebrated our happiness. We bought a modest house in a quiet suburban neighborhood, and a few years later, our world was illuminated by the arrival of our daughter, Lily. My life was full, not with material excess, but with love, purpose, and a hard-earned peace. Sandra and Ethan were distant, almost forgotten figures, relegated to the periphery of my thoughts. I hadn't seen or spoken to them in years, a silence I had actively cultivated. Then came the phishing call. It was a Tuesday evening, a few weeks before the confrontation I never saw coming. Sandra called Mark's phone, not mine. He told me about it later, puzzled and a little wary. She'd been overly sweet, asking about his work, about Lily, her voice dripping with an uncharacteristic interest. Then she'd subtly steered the conversation. "Oh, the economy is so unpredictable these days, isn't it? I just hope you and Amanda are managing all right. It must be a struggle for Amanda supporting a family, even with her job." Mark, ever astute, gave polite, non-committal answers, sensing she was digging. "And I heard her company is doing exceptionally well." Sandra had pressed. "Her salary, the bonuses. They must be quite generous." Mark ended the call feeling uneasy, and when he relayed it to me, a prickle of apprehension ran down my spine. It was so out of character, so transparently an attempt to gauge our financial situation. "She's up to something," I told Mark. "I don't know what, but this isn't just a friendly check-in." We filed it away, an ominous little flag in the back of our minds. The day it all came to a head was a crisp Saturday in October. The autumn leaves were painting our street in hues of gold and crimson. I was in the kitchen laughing as Lily, now 5, tried to help me bake cookies, mostly by getting flour on her nose. Mark was in the living room reading her a story. It was a perfect, ordinary domestic scene, the kind of quiet joy I had fought so hard to build. The doorbell rang. Mark went to answer it, Lily trailing curiously behind him. I heard his voice, initially polite, then a note of surprise followed by a strained, "Amanda, could you come here for a moment?" wiping flour from my hands. I walked to the front door, and there they stood, Sandra Miller and Ethan Bishop. The sight of them was a jolt. They looked different. Sandra, who had always been impeccably dressed, her hair perfectly coiffed, looked tired and worn. Her clothes were neat but dated, and there were lines of stress etched around her eyes and mouth that no amount of makeup could hide. Ethan, once so cocky and preening, was slumped, his shoulders rounded. He avoided my gaze, a stark contrast to his former arrogance. He looked older than his years, a hunted expression in his eyes. The aura of entitlement that had always clung to them was gone, replaced by a palpable air of desperation. "Amanda?" Sandra said, her voice attempting a warmth that didn't reach her eyes. "It's so good to see you. And this must be little Lily, how she's grown." She tried to smile at Lily, who instinctively pressed closer to Mark. An awkward silence hung in the air. Mark stood beside me, his arm protectively around my shoulder, his expression unreadable but firm. "What do you want, Sandra?" I asked, my voice even betraying none of the turmoil and old hurts that seeing them stirred within me. Ethan finally looked up, his gaze flickered over our comfortable entryway, the sounds of domestic bliss from inside, and then quickly down to his shoes again. Sandra wrung her hands. "Well, dear, we were just in the neighborhood, and we find ourselves in a bit of a predicament." She paused, then rushed on. "Things haven't been easy. Ethan's businesses, well, there were some unfortunate setbacks, and my investments. The market has been so cruel." It was Ethan who finally blurted it out, his voice raspy. "We need money, Amanda. We need your help." There it was, the reason for the fishing call, the reason for their unannounced appearance on my doorstep. They weren't here for reconciliation or to see their granddaughter. They were here because they were broke. A strange calmness settled over me. All the years of pain, of struggle, of their casual cruelty coalesced into this single moment. The power dynamic had irrevocably, undeniably shifted. They were the supplicants now standing on my porch asking for my help. I looked from Sandra's anxious face to Ethan's downcast one. Mark's hand tightened slightly on my shoulder, a silent message of support. Lily watched us, her small face serious. "Help?" I repeated, my voice quiet but clear. "You want my help?" I took a breath. "Let me tell you about help, Sandra. Let me tell you about support, Ethan." And then I began. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. My voice was steady, almost detached, as I laid out the litany of their betrayals, each word a carefully placed stone, building a wall they could not breach. I remember my high school graduation day. I started looking directly at Sandra. The day you told me my father's college fund, the money he saved meticulously for my education, was being given to Ethan for his business plans. You said university might not be the best fit for me. I turned to Ethan. And you, Ethan, told me to just take out loans as if it were nothing. Sandra opened her mouth to speak a protest forming, but I held up a hand. I'm not finished. I remember the Thanksgiving dinners. I continued my gaze, sweeping over both of them. Ethan loudly mocking my student life in front of your business contacts, asking if I was still making lattes and scraping by. And you, Sandra, adding that I was doing the best I could, implying I wasn't cut out for success right away. Public humiliation served up alongside the turkey. Ethan flinched, color rising in his cheeks. Sandra stared at me, her expression hardening. I remember Ethan in the grocery store. I went on, my voice gaining a steely edge. You with your cart full of expensive steaks, taunting me with my basket of canned soup, saying I could have had it easier. You seem to enjoy my hardship. That's not fair, Amanda. Sandra interjected, her voice sharp. We always wanted what was best for whom, Sandra? I cut her off. Best for Ethan, perhaps. I remember your accidental pocket dial just after Mark and I had talked about getting engaged. I heard you, Sandra, boasting about Ethan's brilliant future while dismissing my happiness, telling your friends Mark and I could barely afford a fancy dinner. Do you have any idea how that felt? Sandra looked momentarily stunned, caught out. I remember the $10 gift card for my 20th birthday with that charming note about how not everyone has Ethan's stamina for success. Such generosity. My tone was laced with sarcasm. And Ethan, your condescending career advice when I finally landed my first real job, warning me not to aim too high. It seems your own aim was a bit off, wouldn't you say? Ethan looked like he wanted the ground to swallow him. He mumbled, Things just didn't work out. No, I said. They didn't. The money you took, my father's money. Where did that go, Ethan? Into those failed ventures, into the lifestyle you flaunted while I worked 3 jobs to pay for my tuition. Sandra finally found her voice defensive and indignant. We did what we thought was best. Ethan had potential. It was an investment in the family's future. My future didn't count, did it? I asked, my voice still dangerously calm. My potential was irrelevant. You didn't invest in family, Sandra. You gambled with my future, with money my father specifically set aside for me, and you lost. And you, Ethan, you happily took it. A long, heavy silence descended. The cool autumn air seemed to crackle with unspoken emotions. Mark stood like a statue beside me, his presence a bulwark. Lily, sensing the tension, hid her face against his leg. So now, I said, bringing my gaze to rest fully on Sandra, then Ethan, after years of neglect, manipulation, and outright sabotage, you stand on my doorstep in front of the home I built, beside the family I nurtured, and you ask me for money. I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. The shock on their faces was profound. Sandra's eyes darted around as if looking for an escape or an ally. Ethan stared at his feet, the picture of defeated shame. The answer, I said, my voice ringing with a finality that brooked no argument, is no. Sandra gasped. Amanda, how can you be so cruel? We're your family. Family. I almost laughed. You haven't been family to me for a very long time. Family supports. Family encourages. Family doesn't steal and belittle. The life I have, Mark and I built ourselves. We built it not just without your help, but in direct opposition to every obstacle you placed in my path, every disparaging word you uttered. I took another deep breath, a sense of profound, liberating clarity washing over me. I owe you nothing. Absolutely nothing. You taught me a very valuable lesson, Sandra Ethan. You taught me to rely only on myself, to trust my own strength to build my own security. And for that, in a strange, twisted way, I am grateful. You forged me in the fire of your indifference. I stepped back slightly, a gesture of dismissal. Now I need you to leave my property. Ethan looked up, a flicker of something, anger, desperation in his eyes, but he said nothing. Sandra, however, was not one to go quietly, her face contorted with fury. You'll regret this, Amanda, she hissed, her voice low and venomous. You'll regret turning your back on your own flesh and blood. The only regret I have, Sandra, I replied, my voice unwavering, is not drawing this boundary sooner. Mark, would you please see them out? Mark, who hadn't said a word throughout my speech, simply nodded, his eyes cold as he looked at them. He opened the door wider, a clear invitation for them to depart. Ethan turned without a word and shuffled down the porch steps. Sandra lingered for a moment, her eyes blazing with impotent rage. Then she spun on her heel and followed her son, her shoulders stiff with indignation. We watched them walk down the driveway and onto the street, two diminished figures retreating into the autumn afternoon. Then Mark closed the door. The click of the latch was one of the most satisfying sounds I had ever heard. I leaned against the closed door, a long, shuddering breath escaping me. My heart was pounding, a mixture of adrenaline, vindication, and a strange, lingering sadness. But above it all, I felt a profound sense of triumph. Not a gloating triumph, but the quiet, powerful victory of a survivor who had finally, unequivocally spoken her truth and reclaimed her power. Lily looked up at me, her eyes wide. I knelt and hugged her tightly. "It's okay, sweetie," I whispered. "Everything is okay now." Mark wrapped his arms around both of us. In the warmth of their embrace, I knew I had done the right thing. The ghosts of the past had been faced, and they had been vanquished. The immediate aftermath of the confrontation was a strange mix of exhilaration and exhaustion. For the first 24 hours, it was all Mark and I could talk about. We replayed the scene, his quiet pride in my strength, a soothing balm to the old wounds that had been briefly reopened. "You were incredible, Amanda," he said, holding my hand tightly that evening after Lily was asleep. "You said everything that needed to be said with such dignity." There was a sense of finality, as if a heavy, invisible chain I hadn't fully realized I was dragging had finally been severed. I felt lighter, freer, but also a little raw, like a freshly healed wound that had been bumped. There was a touch of sadness, too. Not for them, but for the family I should have had the support that was never there. But that sadness was quickly overshadowed by relief and a burgeoning sense of peace. Within a week, Sandra began her predictable damage control. I heard it through a distant aunt who called her voice laced with awkward sympathy and a hint of disapproval. "Amanda, dear," she'd begun, "I had a rather upsetting call from Sandra. She's telling everyone that you've become so successful, you've forgotten where you came from, that you're rich but stingy, ungrateful, and turned your back on her and Ethan when they were in desperate need." My aunt relayed Sandra's tearful and, I imagined, entirely fabricated account of my cruelty and heartlessness. According to Sandra, she had only wanted to reconnect, and my cold refusal to help her ailing son ailing from what laziness and incompetence was proof of my bad character. She was painting herself as the victim, the spurned mother in me as the cold, nouveau riche monster. Initially, a flare of anger shot through me. How dare she try to twist the narrative to slander me to the few remaining family connections we had? But then a sense of weary resignation settled in. This was classic Sandra. Manipulation and gossip were her currencies. "Thank you for letting me know, Aunt Carol," I said calmly. "Sandra's version of events is, shall we say, highly edited. I have my reasons for the decisions I've made, and I stand by them. Those who know me, truly know me, will understand." I didn't try to defend myself further or offer my side of the story to every relative Sandra contacted. I realized it was futile. Her attempts to ruin my reputation were just the last desperate gasps of a failed manipulator. My life, my character, my real friends and loving family were my truth. Mark and I discussed it, and we agreed silence towards her campaign was the best response. We blocked Sandra's and Ethan's numbers on our phones and social media. We established new firm boundaries. If any flying monkeys tried to bring up the subject, I would politely but firmly state, "That chapter of my life is closed. I won't be discussing Sandra or Ethan further." Most people sensing my resolve respected it. A few acquaintances, those on the fringes of Sandra's old social circle, might have bought her story. I occasionally felt a cool glance or an awkward silence at community events if our paths crossed with someone I knew was still in her orbit. But it didn't matter. My true support system, Mark, Lily, my close friends, even my supportive manager at work, to whom I vaguely mentioned some difficult family drama without going into lurid detail, rallied around me. My manager, a sharp, empathetic woman named Ms. Evans, simply said, "Amanda, your work ethic and integrity here speak volumes. Never let anyone else's negativity define you." Her words were a quiet but powerful affirmation. The small-scale community reaction was mixed but largely irrelevant to my peace of mind. Those who mattered knew my character. Sandra's malicious gossip, I realized, said more about her own bitterness and desperation than it did about me. Her attempts at damage control were failing because the foundation of her claims, her own supposed virtue and my supposed cruelty, was built on lies. The legal or official consequences for them were simply the natural outcome of their poor choices, financial ruin. There were no investigations to be launched against them from my end. Their own actions were consequence enough. The only authority figure taking action was me by firmly closing the door on their toxicity and refusing to be drawn into their drama. My newfound confidence wasn't loud or aggressive. It was a quiet, unshakable certainty in my own worth and the life I had built. The falling action was less about their dramatic downfall in the eyes of the world and more about my serene detachment from their chaos. They were fading into the background, their power to hurt me completely extinguished. The real justice was my peace. A year and a half passed. Life settled into a beautiful, fulfilling rhythm. My career continued to flourish. I received a significant promotion at the marketing firm, now leading a larger team on high-profile campaigns. Ms. Evans often praised my strategic thinking and resilience qualities I knew had been forged in the fires of my past. Mark's architectural design business was also thriving. We sold our modest starter house and bought our dream home, a lovely 2-story house with a big backyard for Lily, who was now a bubbly, confident first grader. We weren't extravagant, but we were comfortable, secure, and most importantly, deeply happy. The shadows of Sandra and Ethan had receded so far, they were almost invisible. I rarely thought of them, and when I did, it was with a distant clinical detachment rather than bitterness. The karma I hadn't actively sought continued to unfold for them, as it often does when lives are built on deceit and entitlement. I'd heard snippets through the grapevine before the confrontation. Ethan's string of failed business ventures, the ones initially funded by my stolen college fund, had spectacularly imploded, leaving a trail of debt. Sandra, who had always prided herself on her social standing, found her status rapidly eroding as their financial situation became common knowledge. Her attempts to maintain appearances grew increasingly desperate and transparent. One Saturday, about a year after they'd appeared on my doorstep, I was at a large, bustling supermarket in a neighboring town, a place I didn't usually frequent. I was picking out fruit when I saw a woman who looked vaguely familiar at the discount bread shelf. Her hair was stringy, her clothes looked worn, and she had a defeated slump to her shoulders. It took me a moment to realize it was Sandra. She was carefully examining a loaf of day-old bread, her face a mask of anxiety as she counted coins from a small purse. She didn't see me. I felt a brief pang, not of sympathy, but of a sad acknowledgement of how far she had fallen. The woman who had judged my cheap canned soup was now struggling to afford basic necessities. I quietly moved to another aisle, the encounter a stark reminder of the different paths our lives had taken. But the most potent full-circle moment of karma came a few months later on a sunny spring day. I had taken Lily to a popular amusement park for her 7th birthday. We were having a wonderful time, Lily squealing with delight on a carousel, her face sticky with cotton candy. As we walked towards the Ferris wheel, Lily suddenly pointed. "Mommy, look! That man spilled his drink." I followed her gaze. A park employee in a drab uniform was mopping up a large puddle of spilled soda near a trash can. He had his back to us initially. As he straightened up, turning slightly, my breath caught in my throat. It was Ethan. He looked utterly defeated. His uniform was ill-fitting, his face gaunt, and etched with a weariness that went beyond physical exhaustion. The arrogant smirk, the condescending drawl, all gone. He looked up, his eyes sweeping absently over the crowd, and for a fleeting second, they met mine. Recognition dawned in his eyes, followed by a wave of what looked like pure, unadulterated shame. His face flushed a dull red, and he immediately looked away, hunching his shoulders as if to make himself smaller, and furiously resumed mopping the sticky mess. No words were exchanged. There was no need. In that brief, silent encounter, everything was laid bare. The golden boy, the one for whom my future had been sacrificed, was now a janitor cleaning up other people's messes in an amusement park. The irony was almost too much. I didn't feel a surge of vindictive triumph. Instead, a profound sense of quiet closure washed over me. It wasn't about revenge. It was about the natural, inevitable balancing of the scales. His choices, his arrogance, his complicity in Sandra's schemes. They had all led him to this point. My choices, my resilience, my refusal to be broken. They had led me to where I stood, a successful woman, a happy wife and mother, able to give my daughter the joyful experiences I had been denied. I gently steered Lily away, a soft smile on my face. "Come on, sweetie. Let's go on that Ferris wheel. You can see the whole world from up there." As we ascended, looking down at the colorful, bustling park, I felt completely free. The last vestiges of resentment had evaporated. I was no longer defined by their cruelty, but by my own strength and the love that surrounded me. I thought of my father, his belief in me. I knew he would be proud, not just of my career or my financial stability, but proud of the person I had become. Someone who had faced down injustice and emerged not bitter, but whole, compassionate, and grateful. My personal growth was evident in this lack of bitterness. Forgiveness, I realized, wasn't about excusing their actions or welcoming them back into my life. It was about releasing the hold their actions had on my emotions, freeing myself from the anger and pain. I had achieved peace, a profound sense of fulfillment that no amount of money could buy. My life was my victory. Lily, growing up in a home filled with love, security, and unwavering support, was the ultimate beneficiary of my journey. She would never know the sting of familial betrayal, never have her dreams dismissed. She would be encouraged to reach for her own stars, just as my father had encouraged me. And that, I realized, was the most beautiful resolution of all. My journey has taught me that standing up for yourself, even when it's against the people who were supposed to protect and nurture you, isn't about seeking revenge. It's about reclaiming your inherent worth, your dignity, and your fundamental right to pursue your own future. True success, the kind that fills your soul, is built on a foundation of integrity, unwavering resilience, and the courage to draw firm lines in the sand. It's about building a life so full of light that the shadows of past betrayals simply cannot reach you. So I ask you, have you ever had to make the difficult choice to protect your peace and your future by drawing a boundary with someone who consistently tried to tear you down, even if they were family? If you believe in the incredible power of resilience and the eventual triumph of quiet strength, please like this story. If you want to hear more accounts of justice served and personal empowerment, hit that subscribe button. And if you know someone who is struggling against unfairness, someone who needs to hear that they can overcome and build a life they deserve, share this story with them. Comment below with your own stories of triumph over adversity, or even just your hometown to show you're here. Let's build a community where we lift each other up, a space where survivors can share their strength and inspire one another. Remember, your past experiences, no matter how painful, do not have to dictate your future. You possess an inner strength you might not even fully realize yet. You have the power to heal, to grow, and to build the life you truly deserve. Never ever let anyone dim your light. We're all in this journey of life together, and by sharing our stories, we make the path a little brighter for everyone.